Okay, welcome everybody to the Team Black and Archaeology Podcast Network webinar. And this is the fourth webinar with Dr. Alan Garfinkel. And we're going to continue doing these throughout 2019. We're going to add some more material. And just so you guys all know, if you head over to arccert.black, you can see our entire training schedule. We have a lot of stuff up there right now for professional archaeologists, but might be of some interest to others as well. And we've got more topics coming down the line. What we're setting up is a $15 a month membership. You can still participate in the live webinars while we do them, but the $15 a month webinar membership will give you access to the growing catalog of stuff we have in the background and anything else we put up on the Team Black website. So you'll be able to watch them as many times as you want, log in and do all that. You also get some benefits. It's kind of tied to the Archaeology Podcast Network, so all that information will be there later. Okay, so we're going to get this going. The presentation is about an hour long, and at the end, like I said, we will have time for questions. If you have to leave early, don't worry. You'll get a recording of this, or you get access to the recording, so that's okay. Or if you have connection issues at any point, don't worry again. You can just watch the recording at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Alan, and I'm going to shut off my video and put up the weird graphic of me looking off into the sky, black and white, and I will come back at the end and we'll do the question and answer. So Alan, take it away.
Great. Chris Webster, I'm honored again, as always, to be with the Archaeology Podcast Network and to present on one of my favorite topics having to do with Native American cosmology and religious behavior, ceremonialism and ritual. It's something that I've been involved in for about the last 40 years. This particular presentation is going to focus on the far west and about the native cosmology. And I'm also going to include a particular presentation with this overview relating to a case study that I was involved with to integrate our understanding into a actual research project. And with no further ado, here we go. In the desert west and in the far west throughout North America, if we begin to look at the Great Basin, Nummic, which means Great Basin Paiute Shoshone, or even the archaic deep time Uto-Aztecan native people, these worldviews have something in common, and that is they saw the world as a tiered or layered cosmological universe. And that this particular universe is divided into strata or layers, at a minimum 3, an upper, a middle, and lower realm, but even more often up to 5 or even a greater number than that. Each stratum of this cosmological universe was inhabited by groups, different classes of animal persons. These were supramundane beings, and they were immortals. In the native taxonomy, we classify these animal beings according to their environment and their behavior, so their habits and their habitats. Here's a quick picture of what I'm going to be presenting. And you'll see that each strata has a different color. The uppermost color is white. The immediate subordinate color is yellow. Then we go to a green or grayish blue, red, and then a black. This was my attempt over the course of my career to put together a quick and dirty, a sort of a cosmological picture of the way in which both Nummic, Great Basin, Paiute, and Shoshone, and ancient Uto-Aztecan people see the world. It's an outline. I can help you to understand it in a fashion, but we'll delve in deeper and deeper as we sort of pierce the veil. But if you can see in the uppermost heavens, in that highest realm, you have sort of the night sky at the top, you've got stars, the Milky Way, the heavens, and you have a white layer in which we have the sky. We have an immediate lower level, which are the mountains. Then we have an intermediate layer, what might be called the foothills. And then a terrestrial zone called the earth. And then a netherworld, which we can call the underworld. This particular block here is called an axis mundi, which is sort of the portal or the current, the conduit or the connector for all of those various layers. And the series of arrows as they go around in a circle is what we call the journey of ascent and descent. It has to do with life and death, return, rebirth, ascent, birth and emergence, moving up to the sky world, and then in turn, returning back to the earth. This is not my particular expression of this. This is based on a number of other brilliant anthropologists, linguists, including Gauss, and then an anthropologist by the name of Judith Vander, and then a very famous comparative religionist, Ake Holtkrantz, who also studied the Great Basin and other comparative religions all across the world. So if we look closer, here we have this tiered cosmology. As I said, each color is associated with a particular stratum, and each stratum has a principal or indexical shamanistic animal deity or animal master. The animal master concept is a concept that's worldwide. These are animal humans that were looked upon as responsible for transforming the spirits of the animals that have been killed and rebirthing them back into the terrestrial human world. So critical to our understanding and appreciation of this Namak and Uto-Aztecan religion is an animal metaphor. So we think about things in terms of animals often. There's also what we call an animistic ontology. Animism, of course, is the belief that all things are alive with power, with agency, with the ability to interact in sort of a cosmic connection. We base this particular picture, this cosmological story, on the oral traditions, call them sacred narratives or mythology, rituals, ceremonies, and the interaction of what Native people have told us about the way in which they view the world. I'm going to start off with an example, just a quick one. Here we see an eagle and a bighorn. Both are akin in that highest realm, the bighorn in the high rugged mountains, and of course, the eagle in the sky. Another anthropologist that studied Great Basin Paiute Shoshone mythology and published a remarkable paper in the Journal of California and Great Basin Anthropology reminds us that bighorn animals are consistently associated as a topmost symbol in this tiered cosmological realm. And multiple sources associate the color white with this sky realm. Now, why would they choose the color white? Well, in part, the eagle, when it's a juvenile, in terms of its tail feathers and wing feathers, and in terms of certain elements of that animal, produce white feathers. With the bighorn, we have the rump patch that's white. And as we go through this, we'll see that each strata of this cosmological universe has a shamanistic boss that represents a class of animals. Okay. Now, if we just begin talking about the bighorn, the wild desert sheep, in native Namak Great Basin Paiute Shoshone language, the Numic, the native term for this large hooved creature, means all game animals as a class. Also, the word for bighorn is a feminine noun. This bighorn animal person is a shamanistic boss, or a deity, let's call them. And they represent all artiodactyls or ungulates, these big game animals, the deer, antelope, elk, moose, etc. Bighorn sheep inhabit one of the most powerful strata, and one having nearly the most supernatural power, spiritual content, and sacredness. The topmost strata is considered the one that has the highest good, including elements relating to healing, curing, upland hunting, shamanism, vision quest, etc. So here's this uppermost plane, and this is the plane or stratum that's home to the immortals and the supernaturals. And bighorn is considered to be one of those creatures. Why would the bighorn sheep be considered such a creature? Well, it's a difficult animal to kill. It lives in this highest and roughest country. And when we pierce the veil and study the word for bighorn in the native languages, the morpheme itself has a derivative that means to kill or hunt. The eagle is this shamanistic boss in that uppermost level, and it's symbolic of supernatural power. The eagle has the color white, as does the bighorn. And as I've mentioned, there are 5 strata linking each with each animal, person, or shamanic supernatural. Mountain tops and these highest heights relate to a stratum up in the sky domain. The sky domain is the domain for the eagle, the thunderbird, the sun, the bighorn sheep, and a whole other package of phenomenon that we associate with that arena. This eagle animal person is the shamanistic master of that domain and perceived as one of the most powerful of all creatures. When we think about that uppermost strata, besides the color white, which is associated with that purity, that element of that highest realms, the particular manifestations and metaphors and phenomenon associated with that strata include snow, fog, smoke, clouds, feathers, those white rumps of the bighorn, and importantly, the white horse in what's called the ghost dance religion, and of course, the sun. And we'll talk more about the ghost dance religion in a little bit. That uppermost realm is considered to be the zenith or epitome of this native cosmology. It's the holiest, most sacred, and most powerful of all these domains. This is also the engine, the domain of rain, thunder, and lightning. And so there's a tremendous amount of energy and blessings attached to that highest, uppermost strata. As we look further into that uppermost strata, that sky world, we can look at ancient Uto-Aztecan cosmology relating to the sun. The sun was perceived as riding on the back of an eagle, and it would cross the heavens on the back of a jaguar. Hence, the sun was equivalent to the eagle, and both are recognized as representing the color white and inhabiting this dominating the sky world. The sun is seen as a male being. It creates heat, creates light, creates fire and dryness. And sun, of course, is seen as the chief creator, the central being, the topmost and singular divine being for both the Great Basin Paiute Shoshone, known as the Namak, and the Nahua or Aztec people. A further symbolism in this same package is feather and feathers, and those are equated with invisibility, lightness, mist, wind, and breath. Hence, all of those particular manifestations are seen as a key metaphor and a meaningful equivalent, something that is a symbol for the soul, the spirit, and cosmic energy. The eagle is seen as what might be called an indexical animal of the sky. It's known for its power, its speed, its eyesight, exceptional ability as a keen hunter. Eagles were captured by Native Americans as juveniles, in some cases sacrificed. They were caged and kept for their white plumage and later released. That white plumage was used in rituals as an adornment. And we can see here where we have a California Indian shaman, a ritualist, a ritual adept, who's wearing an eagle feather skirt and eagle feathers in his headdress. And these were the feathers that were identified with chiefs and with shamans. Remember also that the sky is acquainted with this energy producing rain. And rain, lightning, and thunder are all considered this package of elements, these supernatural beings of the sky. These were all typically associated with the color white and also with the supernatural being called Thunderbird and Hummingbird. Thunderbird was known throughout North America as this huge avian creature that created thunder and lightning by the flapping of their enormous wings and appeared to bring on the rain and thunder and lightning from the movement of their wings. Also, the sound and movement of an instrument called a bull roarer, which is this string and a wooden board attached, had these very ethereal or mystical sound, and that's equated with rain, thunder, and lightning. There's a picture right there of the Thunderbird, and you can see the rain coming down from above the Thunderbird's head. So below this uppermost level, this sky level, this white level, is a yellow level, and it is identified as being represented by the animal person, this shamanic personage called the mountain lion, which is the master of that particular intermediate level. Moving one stratum below that is a third level, almost called center earth. Its colors are green, gray, and blue. And it's ruled by the wolf, who of course is also a kindred to the coyote. The fourth stratum is lower earth. This is the terrestrial level. Weasel and the color red is associated with this terrestrial level. The animal person or shamanic supernatural, the master of the domain, is this red creature known as a weasel. To the native Great Basin people, this is the terrestrial plane. This is the plane upon which people live. Red represents life, blood, and joy to the Great Basin Paiute Shoshone, as well as the ancient Uto-Aztecans. It's a metaphor for soil and earth and the good and joyous elements of life. Red, of course, is recognized as a powerful color. It's useful in healing, has a key association with blood, and hence with life and life energy. And also with red pigment, the geological material is known as the stone called hematite, and it's used to make red paint or red ochre. Now the fifth and final stratum, moving downward from the highest elevations, is this underworld or netherworld. And as we might anticipate, this underworld is chiefly conducted or mastered by the underworld being the shamanistic animal human known as the rattlesnake. So this is the bottom plane, or the nadir, and black is the color metaphor here. Black, of course, is representative of death, darkness, and war. And the underworld is seen as associated with nighttime and cold and wet and feminine. And we'll begin to understand why all of that is a package of metaphors momentarily. The animals associated with this domain, or living in this particular strata, are liminal animals. Liminal animals are animals that appear in two levels simultaneously. They live on the edge. They live in a contiguous world, right next to the surface of the ground and the underworld, the world above and the world below. And these portals are portals to the supernatural world. So the quail, the chuckawalla, the desert tortoise, the water turtle are all guardians or supernatural associates to the rattlesnake. The portals into this underworld are cracks in rocks, streams, lakes, ponds, rock shelters, caves. Those are all these sort of important entrances and exits that connect these layered strata. Now, the rattlesnake is interesting, and it's taken me quite a while to really understand its symbolism and how it works for Native people, because it's exactly opposite and counterintuitive to what the Western world would have us believe would be associated with rattlesnakes. We think of them as evil creatures and symbols of death and destruction. Now, Native people have a different frame of thinking about snakes and rattlesnakes specifically. Native people believe often, and most prominently, even throughout the world, that snakes are water beings, bringers of life, and that they're associated with plants and sort of the renewal and regrowth. Now, how would that come to be? Well, the way that works is because of the sinuous motion of the snakes themselves. They are perceived as akin to streams or flows of water. Besides that, they are a life symbol, since when one peers or opens up a human body, they see veins, arteries, and intestines, all looking very much like snakes. Also, the rattlesnake, in shedding its skin, is a symbol of resurrection, of renewal, of the regeneration of life. However, at the same time, it has this ability to kill and is seen as a powerful and deadly creature. So it's recognized as one of those key liminal beings, since it crawls along the ground, but also hides and lives in the cracks. Now, when we think of the moon, Native people identify the moon as an element of the underworld, and the moon is considered a night sun. The moon, in turn, is also seen as a woman. It's akin to a mother. Why is it considered in that fashion? When you view the moon in its stages of growth, it's akin to a pregnancy. As it grows and grows and grows, it continues to its fullness, and then it passes away and comes back again. It's viewed as an earth mother because it's seen as coming up from the underworld, arising into the sky from beneath the earth's horizon. Furthermore, the cycles of the moon are mirrored by a woman's menstrual period, and so that 29 to 30-day cycle is consistent with, synchronous with, a lunar cycle. So that's why we call each of the 12 intervals in our calendar a month, which comes from the word moon. this underworld level, as I mentioned, in part, as one of the beings that is a guardian being between the upper world and the lower world, is the quail. Now, the quail is seen one of these liminal beings. It's a ground bird that one sees in the desert near water. And it comes upon you by surprise. First it's hidden, and then you move upon it and it explodes and it frightens you. It's a bird with feathers. Feathers are seen as akin to breath, wind, and life. Quail are very fertile and have an amazing vitality. Broods and broods, unbelievable numbers of young. Broods are typically a half a dozen or more chicks, are not unusual, and they have 2 broods at least per year. They have a top knot on their head, and this head adornment perhaps gives them a bit of prestige or headship in wearing this headdress. Now, interestingly enough, there's another side to the quail, and that is they mimic the habit of sickness, death, and resurrection. This is something that I learned from probing the depths of mystery of quail. When you come upon, or there's a predator trying to chase down a quail then feigns sickness. If a predator goes after the juvenile quail, the quail become catatonic and they are frozen and they appear to be dead. You can pick them up with your hand and then eventually they'll come back to life. So it looks as though they're going through a resurrection or a rebirth or renewal. I'm going to take this package of information that I provided you as a background to understanding the layered universe of the ancient Uto-Aztecan people in the Great Basin, Paiute, Shoshone, Nunavut. And I want to apply that to looking at ghost dance cosmology and interrelating it to the symbolism and the nature of the ceremonialism and metaphors. And I think you can then understand better how to apply some of the symbolism that I provided you in this brief overview. So what's the ghost dance? Well, anthropologists, the number one, I would say, millennial expression or messianic movement or religious tradition that has fascinated and obsessed anthropologists for well over 100 years or more has been the ghost dance. This was a phenomenon, a revitalistic or millennial movement, a crisis rites, of where natives came to believe in 1870 and 1890 that if they danced the round dance or the circle dance and prayed, the world would return back to its natural, unharmed state before intrusion of settlers, Euro-Americans, and the damage that they did to the native people and the environment. Most anthropologists who have studied the ghost dance believe that the purpose of the dance was to bring back the dead. That was including native people and animals. They believed that if they danced and prayed, that the world would then return back to the way it was before Euro-American intrusion and before the time when settlers introduced devastating diseases and their destructive habits that nearly destroyed all Native Americans throughout North America. They believed that there would be a new heaven on earth, and integrated into this movement, this religious resurgence, were strong elements of rain shamanism, the theme of resurrection, eagle feather metaphors, and what we call white horse oral tradition, interfingered into this ghost dance lore. In Eastern California, basically just east of the Sierras in the Western Mojave Desert, or the southwestern corner of the Great Basin, there's at least 20, to my knowledge, and maybe more, paintings, prehistoric paintings by Native Americans that have been identified as what we call ghost dance paintings. Now, some of these paintings, these historic paintings of many colors, are extraordinarily rich in imagery, including an extensive array of naturalistic or representational elements. Now, these paintings are somewhat different from many other Native American paintings that we know about prehistorically. Great Basin Paiute Shoshones did do paintings on rocks, but many times they were monochromatic, one color, rendered only in red, and they were chiefly of abstract imagery. Now, these ghost dance paintings we've identified often have a large number of individual figures or elements. Some have 20, some have more than 100. Recent work by anthropologists by the name of Richard Stoffel out in Arizona has allowed us to continue to learn more about these types of paintings. Now, these are sites that are historic. They occur in rock shelters, in small caves. And again, they're relatively recent. They would date to 1870 to 1890, maybe even as late as the mid-1890s to the turn of the century. These are rock art sites. Now, if you see the cosmic colors in the top, there's a procedure that we use when we take photographs. It's called de-stretch, and it brings out the color that we can't see that is getting invisible. So it doesn't look quite that brilliant, but so you'll see some of these pictures are a little bit post-processed. But these paintings are geographically confined within Great Basin Paiute Shoshone territory. And they're located in the Aboriginal territories of what we call the Panamint Shoshone or the Timbisha or the Koso, Owens Valley Paiute, and the Kawayasu. So they're on the eastern skirt of the Sierra Nevadas. They're over in the Inyo Mono region. Now, we favor hypotheses that these pictures that I'm going to show you refer to and symbolize the key elements, the most important precepts of these Great Basin Paiute religions, and that they also have integrated or interfingered into these pictures, these full-color codices, if you will, themes of ghost dance religion. So here's some other rock paintings, and they've kept my attention for over 30 years. I probably saw the first one when I was a young man, and I'm almost an old man now. I'm 66, and I think I saw my first one in my early 20s. And given we have new technology that allows us to peer more deeply at these images, we're beginning to see new things and revealing deeper meanings that we weren't able to see before. And this illumination, of course, comes from intense literature study, but also improved physical documentation. This gentleman with the cowboy hat or Stetson was the messianic, revitalistic leader of the 1890 ghost dance. His name was Wavoka in his native language, and he was a shaman, a gentleman who was actually a weather shaman as well. And this cowboy, that Stetson hat, played a significant part as a symbol of the ghost dance religion. Now, if you begin to look at these paintings here that I've shown you, these are post-processed. I think you'll begin to see that in some instances, you can see the cowboy hat of a Stetson. You can see a gun. You can see a man on horseback. You can see another Stetson hat, the cowboy hat upon that gentleman. You can see the horse. And even in this picture here, the largest on the lowermost left, you can see there's an individual astride a big white zoomorph that for the longest time we couldn't figure out what that was. Well, with post-processing and de-stretch, you can see the reins of those horses and the individual astride that horse. So again, that's a white horse symbolism. So this inventory of these ghost dance sites have figures, animal figures. They have men on horseback. They have individuals with Stetson hats. The individuals often are always black or white. Guns figure importantly because it's the ghost dance belief that when one goes through and sings and dances and prays, that they become invulnerable to bullets. And the sound of the rifle was akin to and equivalent to the thunderclap of the thunder and lightning. So when we see these strings of white or black people, I would argue that these are the dead, either being resurrected or coming down from the heavens. They are the spirit people. They are the people being brought back, the ancestors. In a place called Panama City, up there in the area just east of Death Valley, there's a painting, a ghost dance painting that has over 100 individual elements. And right there is that man astride the white horse. White horses are prominent in ghost dance lore. They're a key element in that 1890 ghost dance, again, with that concept of white being so important. You can also pick out in these pictures bighorn sheep, deer, and other animals. And I believe that they're being depicted because it's the expectation of the prayer and the ghost dance rituals that through sympathetic magic and resurrection, they can bring back the ancestral people, the dead, and also bring back the animals, and the natural world can come back to the way it was before. Now, interestingly enough, as I just mentioned, thunderbirds are an important creature to Native people. And if you look closely in this uppermost picture, you'll notice that there is a winged yellow figure of a thunderbird. Also, Thunderbird, and thunder was the younger brother of the sun. And in that uppermost realm of this particular painting, you see celestial, star-like or sun-like symbols. These powerful beings are symbolic. They're again metaphors for abundance, fertility, strength, and fecundity. And what the passion is, it's all about earth renewal. The hunting scenes that you're seeing here, and you could even see an otlotl or spear thrower that exists in the rightmost, lowermost image. These are copies of earlier iconography that appeared in prehistoric times, again, bringing back the old ways and bringing back the old symbols. Relates to a reaching back, a return to earlier periods, and trying to recreate a traditional culture that's under attack. Here are some other pictures of paintings of Native people in ghost dance paintings. Now you see here in white, and you see here in black, this string of people. I believe that what's being represented is the ghost dancers, the round or circle dance. And these are the people that are either being resurrected from the underworld, the black world, or coming down from the heavens, the spirit world, the most sacred. And what you see on their heads are eagle feathers. Now, the reason I say that is those other two pictures in the bottommost part of this slide are an actual ghost dance. And as they do the round dance, a number of the dancers are wearing eagle feathers. And these eagle feathers, of course, were one of the most important and the highest sacredness and powerful of all of the metaphors. So that's a little bit of the picture of rock art, rock painting metaphor relating to the religious cosmology. I'm going to do a little bit of a quick jaunt into another aspect of that same phenomenon, talking about symbolism of the bighorn sheep, of the animal metaphors, concept of life and death, and also kind of moving into this area of vitality, abundance, and fertility, which is so central to our understanding of Uto-Aztecan and Numic religious thought. The people of the desert west, the far west, and all of us for 90% or more of the time that humans have been on this earth, were foragers, hunters and gatherers. And foragers seem to link both human and animal sexuality and human reproduction with hunting success, with game animal fertility. When we've spoken to men, they appear to talk about large game hunting in the far west and understood as equivalent to women's giving birth. Bows and arrows and spears are included in a class of what they call male-gendered tools of fertility. So we're closely connected to the male role of success, the hunter as a key subsistence provider. In the Great Basin, when we talk about the word for arrow, it's the same word, it's a synonym, a near synonym for the word penis. Numic creation stories have women associated with meat. So to reach sexual maturity, a boy needs to kill a big game animal. Most often, it is a bighorn sheep. So in Western Shoshone myths, they indicate that coyote only achieves manhood by slaying a mountain sheep. One of the least impressive elements of bighorn sheep has to be their tails. Yet in Eastern California and in rock art in general, we find that in some of the areas where the greatest abundance of prehistoric drawings are, and they depict tremendous numbers of bighorn sheep, why is it that these images consistently have tails? Tails are on bighorn sheep are normally tucked right, nested right down in their buttocks, and you don't really get to see their tails. But most researchers, after viewing these pictures, agreed that this tail posture must be of significance in a metaphoric way. Well, our research indicates that these bighorn drawings have their tails consistently raised up, upwards towards the heavens or parallel to the ground. So there was something going on with this upward or parallel animal behavior that was important to our understanding of native cosmology. There was a couple of researchers, and they looked at over 1,000 pictures of bighorn and found that almost none of them had elevated tails, none. Well, when I began to peer into this question, wildlife biologists told me that the only time that the bighorn sheep would have its tail up in the air is when they were open for reproduction. It was called flagging. And so the hue during estrus would communicate to the ram that they're open and willing to procreate. This estrus sign is a way to enforce or reinforce or reassure reproduction. They seek out the ram, they stand to be mounted. There's rapid tail movement in this flagging. That raised tail in the presence of the ram shows that they can be mounted and they're open for reproduction. So anthropologists have argued that this upraised tail in rock pictures are metaphors or signals for sexual receptivity. So here are the only 3 pictures in about 50,000 images that exist in my research area of bighorn sheep with their tails decidedly towards the ground. So I always say dead, dead, and mostly dead. So if we identify tails down, we've seen only 3 sheep in thousands that I've seen in this particular region. So what does it mean? Well, what it means is that there is a phenomenon, a communication style in rendering animals that speaks of vitality, increase, renewal, and rebirth, fertility, all of that metaphor, that package for life. What's extraordinary in my mind is when you look at a painting, a ghost dance painting in Panama City with 100 individual elements, many of the animals have their tails, rather than up, they have them decidedly down. Down towards the underworld, down towards the underworld, down, down, down. Well, since that is such an interesting attribute to all of a sudden be in the different direction, I would think that maybe it has to do with a metaphor for either coming up from the underworld and being resurrected or moving in this cycle of life, as the ghost dance had particular metaphors for. Also, if you look at this particular painting, we see a package of sky world figures in the uppermost area, the terrestrial figures in the middle, and the blackened lowermost figures in the bottom. Also, if you study it, it appears that the rock was painted in a certain cycle or order, so that black was put on first, then the red, and yellow and white came last, which seems to be a parallel pattern to the Numic cosmological realm of a layered universe. So in summary, if I was going to talk about these ghost dance rock paintings as sort of a manifestation and representation of this cosmological realm, I would say that these paintings, through their subject matter, the use of color, certain animal attributes, and their spatiality, may have been a cosmological map or a cognitive map of the way in which Native people thought about their universe. There's a whole realm of references that we can go through. A number of them that I've published myself or with colleagues that talk about this deep time Uto-Aztecan symbolism or Great Basin Paiute Shoshone realm, and I can provide you with this list if you simply have an interest. And then last of all, I want to thank you all for participating with me this evening. Feel free to share with others, tell them about your experience, and please spread the word. I welcome your questions right now, of course, and this is my email address and my telephone number. Let me know if you have a need for me, if you need to speak before a group, or I'm always available. Call or email me for details. And also, I'd be most happy to and honored to assist in your research.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. So we will now open it up to questions. I'll say real quick, though, that if you did arrive after we started, we will be providing this presentation. It's being recorded right now. And if you want your voice on here, that's okay. If you don't, you can just put a question in the chat and I can ask it for you. So if anyone has any questions, let's get started.
Hi, Larissa. I didn't get to say hi to you.
And you all are muted. I'm going to unmute everybody so you can just mute yourself back if you don't want to talk. So I'm going to mute. Everyone's unmuted now.
Can you hear me?
Larissa says she loved the presentation and learned so much. So that's good.
Oh, that's good.
That's what we aim to do. Yeah.
Maria Bruno, what do you think?
Thank you, Alan. I really enjoyed it.
Is there any parallels to your pre-existing associations and knowledge with Native people?
Yes. I've done quite a bit of studies on the ghost dance. And then I did research in the Oklahoma areas especially with the 5 civilized tribes and with the Cherokee and Osage.
Yes.
But that means I try to put my hands and eyes on as much interesting stuff as I could. And I'm passionate about rock art. I feel just by sitting next to these representations, I just get a lot of information. I just feel the presence of the history.
I think that rock art, and also, if I can even move to a different level, just the symbolism and the metaphor of Native people is really a window into their souls. And what we have available to us, which is remarkable, are these images that exist on rock that are hundreds, thousands, and many thousands of years old. And they can inform. They do help us to better understand the nature of the life ways, the religion, the metaphors for Native people. In my own research, I've used them at many different levels. It's not only the religious level, there's information packed about territoriality, about land use patterns, about the potential of understanding resource depression, or an examination of how Native people exploit their environment and what might have happened prehistorically. It's interesting because I'm reading a brand new book that's been published by Eckhart Malaki and Ellen DeSunayaki, and it's about some of the oldest rock art in America, this all abstract. And one of my articles that Ellen thought was most interesting, and I'm surprised because I hadn't thought that much about it, was what I talked about was the ghost dance, and also about an explosion of rock art pictures in my own research area called COSO. And what I said was that in both of those situations, there appeared to be an artistic fluorescence in response to drastic circumstances, environmental circumstances, and intercultural conflicts, and other circumstances that were occurring to a people. And one of the ways that they tried to assuage their fears and also deal with this cataclysmic set of changes was to express it in their paintings, in their drawings. And one of the things that came back to me in terms of a current phenomenon to sort of make this real for us was when 9/11 happened in America. What was the one thing we ran out of? Flags. People were very much interested in having representations of nationality and the images and the symbolic portrait of who they were as Americans. I find that to be fascinating. Anyways.
Alan, could you back the slide up to the references real quick? Some people are asking for that.
Of course, my pleasure.
And if you have anything that's not on there that is a book or something that somebody could read about this subject, you can just let us know.
Sure. I'd say one of the best books out about the ghost dance is there's an encyclopedia by Michael Hittman. It's inexpensive. It's a paperback book, but it has tremendous original material on the ghost dance, mostly on the 1890, but also on the 1870 ghost dance. And I've been honored to talk with Michael, and he is a very humble individual. But what he did was amass all the primary data for us to better understand the religious metaphor and the circumstances surrounding that expression. The other thing that made me understand ghost dance, which is a much more difficult book to get, is Judith Vander's book on the ghost dance, and it's on the ghost dance poetry and song. It's a 700-page volume, and but if you can get a copy of that, Judith Vander. It's on ghost dance, songs, and poetry.
Alan, I've got a question. When you were talking about the bighorn sheep and their tails being up,
Yes.
Has that behavior, first off, is that a behavior recognized in other animals? And if so, have you read about that sort of behavior being illustrated in rock art representing other animals elsewhere?
Well, I didn't know about the bighorn sheep unless I fell over it. It was something that I obsessed with for years and years and years, and I just couldn't understand why they would depict the tails parallel or up in the air. And I'm not an animal etiologist. I don't understand animal behavior unless I specialize in certain animals and then read everything I can to find it out. But that shocked me when I learned that bighorn sheep, as well as domestic sheep, when they are open to reproduction, would do this exhibition of flagging with their tails. I understand that when deer run away or are in danger, they raise their tails. But that is not the case with bighorn sheep.
Okay. Interesting. Do we have any other questions for Alan before we go?
Rebecca, what'd you think?
Thought it was very informative.
Good. Ask me something.
I think Jay Wilkinson has his hand up as well if his audio's on.
Who is it, Jay?
It says Jay Wilkinson.
Jay, can you hear me?
All right. Well, go ahead, Rebecca.
I just found it interesting we were talking about the layers and how they laid down the color on the rocks.
Yes.
It reminds me, on top of it being how like the world is organized in the cosmology and stuff, how in normal like just general art, you tend to lay down the darker colors first, moving into the lighter colors. I just found that it was
really. I did not know that, Rebecca. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In general color scheme and things like that.
Yeah. And there's something about that underworld strata that is a very positive strata and nurturing strata as well. As I didn't really go into that, but this netherworld is not a bad place. It's where the animals go when they pass away and their spirits are transformed. And so there's stories about the animal master. All right. I think Jay wants to ask me something.
I think so. See if we can
Jay,
hear him.
can you hear me?
Jay, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Jay.
Go ahead. Of course, his name's not Jay, probably, but Jay Wilkinson.
Mr. Wilkinson, can you hear me okay? No? Yes.
I can hear you just fine.
Oh,
Okay.
there you are.
Oh, good.
Oh, great. Actually, this is not Jay Wilkinson. That's just a computer thing here. This is Steve O'Neill.
Oh, Steve O'Neill.
Oh, hi, Steve. How are you?
Doing well and fascinated by what's going on here.
Thank you.
I do actually have a question, though.
Please.
I'm just curious about the block art changes over time. Is there a change that you saw from the local Native American rock art prior to the ghost dance to what is used in the ghost dance iconography, and it actually represented the in the cosmology beliefs of the people?
Did you catch some of that, Chris, or no?
I did. You're breaking up quite a bit there, Steve, but I think he was talking about the differences in...
Can we put him on... Can we blur him out for a minute?
Yeah, hold on.
Background.
I got you muted, Steve, just because the background is a little heavy. So anyway, I think he was talking about the difference between in the rock art, pre-ghost dance rock art and post. What are the differences there? And I think that was the gist of it. I could be wrong, though.
As I study rock art in general, and even in my research area, which is COSO, the Eastern Sierra, I'm beginning to see patterns and changes in both the content and character and configuration of the rock art. Of course, the oldest rock art is chiefly abstract. But you there we go. Thank you.
There we go. That was Larissa's.
Yeah, so it's chiefly abstract with a touch of some of the representational. But the next stratum has some of the most beautiful and ornate and elegant images of these decorated animal people. And for the longest time, in the literature, we believed that these were shamans, and they certainly could be shamans, and that the ornate nature of their coats or their torsos was sort of a decoration and showed the way in which that they were rendered or dressed, and that the feathers or the headdresses were association with shamanic flight, or the metaphor for birds that are so characteristic of shamans. Mm-hmm. So all that makes sense. They also have peculiar animals associated with them, and that's these liminal creatures that are quails, that are chuckawallas, that are, help me, turtles, but these animals that live in two different planes simultaneously. Right. So that's all very interesting, but when we've studied them ever more closely, we found that predominantly, let's say 4-1, they're women. They're all feminine gendered beings. And the feminine gendered beings appear in part to be representing this harvest, this grain, this reproduction, this fertility, this abundance, and trying to emphasize the renewal aspects of this being, which is interesting. Then after that, there's this shift over to representing men and hunting. And they're definitively men, and they're populated with figures that we know because of their gender, which is explicit, are men, and they're very actively hunting game with bows and arrows and with dogs. So that's interesting. When you look at the ghost dance rock paintings, it's a very late historic phenomenon, and they do things there that they've never done before. Like, for instance, they're showing men on horseback. They're showing people with these, cowboy hats, these Stetsons, and the color and the other elements of them are far different from the typical pre-contact way of communicating in rock art. Before, they were abstract, they were monochromatic, what have you. You see the same thing goes on in Koso, because as things began to unravel in Eastern California prehistory, there appears to be this phenomenon where the images become more frequent, they become larger and grander and more complicated. And so almost as things fall apart, as we have environmental adverse effects or other devastating consequences from even cultural contacts, there appears to be an expression of greater and greater religious fervor, but also greater color, greater beauty, greater size, and what have you. So,
okay. We have a question in the chat from Maria Bruna, and she says, I perceive such a mixture of hope and despair or doom in the ghost dance. How do you see it reflected in the paintings?
Same thing. Hope and despair. They're two sides of the same coin. You have to remember, Maria Bruna, that death is just life turned upside down. And when people deal with death on a daily basis, either from hunting or from seeing their dead and also intimately connected, I think they perceive it differently. And I know that there is you have a tremendous overwhelm and a sense of desperation in those paintings, but you also have a sense of bringing back and revitalizing and refreshing what is traditional and what is of value and what is central to the religious and spiritual side of the people. And if I'm going to turn it all on its head again, much of the world right now, Native people are going back to their previous traditions and refreshing and seeing great fervor in their ability to resurrect their traditional culture, to keep and retain the language, to dance, to sing, to create baskets and beautiful artwork. So I think there's a tiny pea pod of hope within the negativity as well.
Okay. One last chance for more questions. If you want to type it in the chat, that's perfectly fine. But while you guys are thinking about it, I'll just remind you, arccert.black is the website. And if you go over there, you see the front page shows you the calendar and everything that you can see. So we have stuff from Alan. We'll get some more stuff up for February on the website, probably this week, maybe early next week, and some more webinars. And we're going to talk about some more packages for different things. I've got some stuff up there for professional archaeologists as well, but anybody can actually take them if it's a subject that interests you. So check that out. Most of those are less cost, and some of them are free if they're related to getting a job. So keep an eye on that space. We're also going to have a $15 per month subscription coming up where you can watch all these webinars at your leisure in the background. And see all the new stuff that comes along. You'll still be able to participate in the live webinars as we have those. Those will be an additional cost if you want to participate live. But if you just want access to the back catalog, then it'll be right there. There will probably be a delay between the live videos and the back catalog just for those people that participated live. So
thanks all for patching in tonight.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed this. Great group. Thank you.
Yep. Maria Bruna says thank you, and she enjoyed the presentation and conversation, and thanks me for hosting. Well, thank you. Love doing it. So, all right. And Rebecca says thank you as well. So thanks everybody. We'll stop the recording, and I'll hit end the meeting, and you're all going to be disconnected at once. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you.